Okay, so just one other comment I want to make. You know, we went through this terrible situation with this heat storm, the windstorm and everything, and you know, we mobilized everything we could, from the National Guard to the state emergency to the federal emergency, and you know, we lost 4 people, but I think it could have been a lot worse. And I'm really glad we got out in front of it. But I'm going to tell you 2 things we're really concerned about, and Dave mentioned it. It's the drought that's going to affect agriculture, and Dave is on it. He's already planning. I've asked him to take a look at what other states are doing that might be unique to deal with this problem. But the other thing I worry about is once we're through the drought, then I worry about floods. Because the ground is so dry, so hard, you worry that when the rains finally come, that we're going to have issues. So just to give you a little heads up to that, it's something that we face, and I think just thinking ahead and preparing is a way to minimize the kind of impact that you might have with these things. So anyway, questions on this or anything else you might have?
Governor, if you had to get Democratic votes for this by removing the income tax piece and leaving the sales tax piece, what would you think of that?
I wouldn't think highly of it, because we don't need to grow the government. I mean, we got ourselves in a position in this state by being just growing government, and when you grow the government, then you have to ultimately figure out how to keep raising revenue. And that's not how we're going to be successful. We're going to be successful. We have been, I'm a little uncomfortable saying this because it's just so, it's so self-promoting. So let me look at my directors and the administration and just tell you, I mean, we are still finding so much of state government is broken. It's not responsive, it's duplicative. We use the MBR to try to corral that. We then moved to try to, in a way that no one thought was possible, to get rid of that deficit and also to cut taxes. And you know, it's interesting to note, we hear all this complaining about the devastating local government cuts. Now, I just saw some Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers that said in the 4 years before I became governor, local governments cut their personnel by 31,000. Since we signed the budget law into effect, local government has grown by 5,600. Now, on the basis of what I read in the reports, I would have thought that you know, people would interpret and say, we cut it by 31,000 and they grew it by 5,600. It's just the opposite. So that's all I read about are these devastating local government cuts. It's kind of hard to argue you got a devastating local government cut when you've grown the government by 5,600 people. So, no, I don't want to do that, but I do believe that there are Democrats that will support this. Because, look, you're going to tax out-of-state oil companies to help small business people in the Mahoning Valley get a tax cut. So I'm not giving up on the fact that we could get some Democrats to do it, but I don't want to grow government with this. That's not the right way to proceed on this.
Governor, have you had some conversation with the Farm Bureau about this plan? I mean, is there any way
you
can speculate?
I talked to the Farm Bureau yesterday. Here's what they said. In the eastern part of the state, farmers are worried that they're going to get taxed on their leases. Okay? If you wrote a lease the right way, you wouldn't pay the severance tax. And if, in fact, you had to pay the severance tax, it's minimal. In the rest of the state, you know, people are, I'm told that they're growing support on the board of the Farm Bureau. I don't have that really confirmed. Is that right, Jim? That's what you're hearing, that we're getting support on there. But, you know, look, it's really hard for organizations in Ohio that have, like, memberships. They don't like this to upset anything. Why do you think it took, like, 100 years for the Ohio Chamber of Commerce to endorse somebody for governor? It's just too easy to ignore making a decision. And frankly, I'm disappointed the Farm Bureau hasn't come out for this, because with Fred Dailey being a guy who's in agriculture, it isn't right that a farmer, you know, theoretically could be paying more taxes than ExxonMobil in Ohio. Then taking the low taxes out and giving it to their shareholders who live in Switzerland, for that matter. That's the big thing today, where the people are investing. So I think when farmers, part of the thing is when people realize what this plan is, which is out-of-state oil companies pay more and all Ohioans pay less, and it improves our business environment, that's a fantastic story. And that's why I know this is ultimately going to become law. But Joe, you know, look, it takes lots of years sometimes to get things through, but these organizations, some of them have been great. Columbus Chamber stood up, Cincinnati Chamber stood up. A lot of them just, you know, like, oh, they're out of session, I don't need to be heard. Yeah, it's just the way it is in politics.
But Governor, just to be clear here, your chart here on your proposed says family farm would pay 0 severance tax. But just to be clear here, family farms right now who do have a well on their property, they do pay the severance tax.
Not necessarily, Bill. It depends how you do your lease. Now, a guy like you would probably not write a real good lease, but a guy who's smart, like Fred Dailey would not. Fred Dailey would not be paying the severance tax, okay? He wouldn't be. It's just the way in which you write your lease. Joe, you want to comment on this?
Yeah, just one thing, Bill. Primarily, those are going to be the existing vertical wells. Those are the small, 49,000 across the state. Those, under our proposal, go to 0 on the gas tax. So because they're low volume. So that they would be paying zero severance tax if they're low volume, which 90% of them are. So that's accurate.
In other words, Bill, you know, with the vertical producers, we're lowering their tax. For the small oil and gas people who have been a bedrock of the economy in this state, their taxes go down. It's the ones that come out of state and do the high volume horizontal drilling. The Exxon Mobils, the Chesapeakes, you've heard of them lately, the Chesapeakes. You know, these are the folks that would, you know, kind of hightail it out of Ohio. Now, we're glad they're here, but we don't want them to take all that out of here so that, you know, Ohioans don't get lower taxes. I mean, this is all about lower taxes for Ohioans. That's why I don't favor using any of this money for higher spending, because all this is designed to continue to improve the economic environment in our state. And let me just say to you, when I talk to CEOs, if I can continue to talk to them about lowering taxes in Ohio, it really gets their attention. They like that. And it's my job to get as many companies in this state as we can get into this state. And even with this severance tax, I mean, we don't know what it's going to produce. One of the companies said $1 trillion, that's $40 billion. And the cumulative nature of the lower income tax, not just individual by individual, but the cumulative nature is a powerful message. But even with the severance tax, that doesn't solve our income tax problem. We have much more tax reform to do in this state. Because the lower this income tax is, the better position we're going to be in order to get these companies to move here. So, Bill, for all those holdings that you now have that you've never revealed to all of us, I try to do a public records request on you. Let Fred Dailey advise you on how to do your lease. Okay?
Governor, are you saying that there's going to be some income tax cuts coming regardless of whether you get the severance tax portion of this?
What I'm saying to you is we're going to continue to work to lower that income tax. We've already done it once. And we are, you know, engaging in tax reform right now, taking a look at it. But it is imperative that our income tax go down. Now, you look at the fastest growing states in the country. You know, Texas, you know, again, #1, no income tax. Oklahoma's fighting to lower their income tax. Kansas just lowered their income tax. North Dakota doing the same thing. And you know, we know about Florida. We know about a lot of states. So. Yeah, Jim, there isn't any question. We have to constantly look at ways in which we can, in fact, lower that income tax. And some of that involved in that would be tax reform. And we'll be more specific when we've got when it's the proper time and we've got a good plan together.
But just in general, in terms of tax reform, what's your working principle going in? That you want it to be any increase to be exactly offset by a decrease, or do you want it to reduce the overall tax burden?
We'll get back to you on that. No, I mean the answer to that is I think it is first of all with this is absolutely a tax cut for all Ohioans, and it isn't Ohioans that are really impacted by the severance tax. To be perfectly honest, these are mostly these high volume drillers are out of state companies. Secondly, I think, I believe I was an advocate of tax reform in Washington. There are ways in which you can reform taxes to bring about a lower income tax. That's one of the things that I did. It's an unknown story. In the middle of negotiations with President Obama and John Boehner, I had an impact. I mean, I didn't have an impact. I tried to. I played a role in that. And I'm a believer in tax reform. I'm a believer that you can, in fact, bring about lower income tax rates if you are willing to look at those people who have been, in one way or another, exempted from taxation or given special deals or, for whatever reason, able to get things through the legislature that keeps the income tax high. So, a lot of people in the, if you talk to Republicans in the legislature, they're all, they want to have income tax cuts, but frankly, this is a bluebird that flew in the window for us. Talking about cuts in government, theoretically, to reduce your income tax is easy. Putting it on, I don't know if you noticed, but when I got the MBR, I vetoed a whole bunch of spending. You got that? Figure it out. Last question.
Governor,
maybe.
Back
Pretty good questions. Yes.
10 to 15 years ago, this idea that Ohioans go to Florida to avoid income tax, that's been around for a while.
Yeah.
And we heard during the tax reform of last decade that, we do this tax reform, we're going to see Floridians coming back to Ohio and they're going to put their money back in Ohio. Now you're saying, let's get this tax cut, they'll come back, put money in Ohio. Do we have any evidence that people are coming back from Florida when we lower our income tax?
Oh, well, I mean, the fact of the matter is it's almost 6%. So think about this. You go to sell, you're going into retirement mode, and you're holding, stock in a company that you helped build. You go to Florida, you pay 0 state income tax, and here you're paying 6%. And for some people, that's enough to buy their own condo. So, no, they're not, our taxes are too high. If you can get those, if you could cut that thing down, get it down to 4% or whatever, boy, what an unbelievable message that sends, not just to those people who move to Florida, who, count the days they're in Florida. You realize what they do. They don't want to live in Florida. I mean, the longer they're down there, the more they are Floridians. But what they do is they count the days as to how many days they're there and how many days they're in Ohio, because they'd love to come back to Ohio. They'd love to be able to be Ohio residents. But, look, this isn't theory. I want you to go out and talk to some of the most successful people in your neighborhood and see where they live. And ask them why they live. Killing the death tax helped us in Ohio. I've had people say to me, I was going to move if you hadn't, in fact, I got a voicemail the other day from somebody saying, if you hadn't killed the death tax, I was gone. I think in many ways the income tax is even tougher because then people don't have to pay it down there. They pay 0 in addition to whatever their federal requirement is. So the lower we make it, and there's thresholds at which it's going to move people. Right now, it's still too darn high. And when people said that they were going to all start moving back, most of the people that were passing these laws, they've never been in business. They never were in the circumstance where they had to understand how these people really think. I kind of got kicked around a little bit because I was in business. Thank God I understand how it works. So it's not magic, but the lower that income tax comes, the more people are willing to say to their spouse, honey, grandkids are in Ohio, let's kind of stay there. So there's no magic to it, but thresholds do matter.
Governor, since this play isn't really played itself out yet as far as what's under the ground, are you worried that maybe raising this income tax even, or the severance tax even a little bit will cause some companies?
No, because look, here's the funny thing. What companies say is they want to have certainty. We had a heck of a time putting our regulations in place. And I basically told the companies, if we don't get tough environmental regulations in place that allow us to create jobs and protect the environment, I'm going to shut the permits down. I had Zeringer going out there figuring out if I had the authority to not issue any permits. At one point, they all told me, oh yeah, you have to have tough rules because we don't want out-of-staters coming in here and wrecking the environment. I happened to agree with them until we started doing it. Then, we had to have Tom Niehaus sit down with them for I don't even know how long, and Wayne Struble to get it done. And fortunately, 315 is a great, is that the title of the bill? Is a great bill. Great regulation for our state. in this area, they want certainty. We're going to give them certainty. And, you know, the fact of the matter is, if they don't get anything out of the ground, guess what? They don't pay. It's only when they take a, you know, I don't know what the price of oil is today, what, $80 a barrel? What is it? 88? I mean, it was 100. Anybody want to make a bet that it's going to stay at 88 or lower? Remember those 2 dimes, that 20 cents they pay on an $88 barrel of oil. That's not fair for Ohioans who can get a tax cut. So, no, I don't worry about that. And let me tell you something. You know what the story is? There's not one of those companies. I don't mean they're lobbyists, but there's not one of those companies, if you talk to an executive, to say that this would in any way discourage anybody from coming to Ohio. And since we've been talking about it, we've seen billions of dollars invested in Ohio. You know why? Because there's gold in them thar hills.
Governor, this